Welcome to Vibe Check, a place where we have open, honest, and authentic conversations about the human side of business. Our goal here is to help you achieve better business outcomes with people-led initiatives. And to get there, there is only room for real talk and genuine advice. No sugarcoating allowed. So, what's a vibe check? I hear you asking. Well, it's a phrase for asking, how are you really doing? It opens the door to meaningful conversations between colleagues, professionals, but most importantly, human beings. My name is Julie Janot, or JJ for short, and I'm your host for this series. My mission in life is to help organizations put the people at the heart of their strategy and their business. And that's exactly what you can expect from our Vibe Check conversations. Let's get right into it. So our guest today is Scott Behson. Scott, hi, and welcome to Vibe Check.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, JJ.
I'm beyond excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for accepting to join us. So allow me to introduce our guest, Scott, today. Scott Behson is a professor of management and Silberman Global Faculty Fellow at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Oof, that's a mouthful. It's a big title. He is also the author of 3 books, believe it or not, the most recent one being The Whole Person Workplace, Building Better Workplaces Through Work Life, Wellness, and Employee Support. It's impressive. In addition to that, Scott is an accomplished speaker and consultant who has worked with leading companies on workplace flexibility and building supportive work cultures, and was also a featured speaker at the UN's International Day of the Family and the White House's Summit for Working Families. You can see and read his book at Time, NPR, NBC, The Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Harvard Business Review, also known as HBR, Workspan, and more. And on the personal side, well, he lives in Nyack, New York with his wife, wonderful son, and his cats. Yay! Maybe we get to see one of them today on the show.
Yeah, they're not in the room right now, but they might come around.
It'll be fun if they do. Thank you again for joining us, being our guest today, Scott. Sure. So as the tradition goes, we must start with the vibe check question. So to open up, I will ask you, how are you doing today? Really?
Yeah. Well, I'm good. I can't complain. Life is good. I'm an academic in the summer, which is a really nice kind of, I could sleep late most days and work on my own schedule, which is really nice. But I will say, because it's really how you doing. So you mentioned my son. My son has graduated high school and he's going to go to college in like a little less than a month. And that's like, weighing on my heart a little bit. I'm going to be a bit of a heartbroken empty nester reasonably soon.
Because he's moving out of state?
Yeah, he's going to be going to school in Boston.
Okay,
which is not that far away.
But still a little bit. Yeah, it's a good drive from New York for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so describe to me the feelings. Like how?
Well, I'm very proud of him, and he's going to do great. And I'm excited for him. And I've worked at a university for a long time, so it's not like he's going to like a completely foreign context for me. But he's our only kid, and we're very close. And I would have to imagine I'm going to feel, at least in the short run, kind of a little heartbroken without him. But one of the things that's different, so, I'm older than you guys, but when I was in college, it was hard to stay in touch with your family and, before cell phones, before Skype or, all these other things. It was like long distance phone call and like phones were in actual locations. So you had to it was Sunday at 7, you had to be there to get your phone call, and it was harder to stay in touch. And now it's so much easier. And I see this with my students. A lot of them text their parents every day, and things like that. So it's, I don't think we'll be really disconnected, but it's hard. It'll be hard to drive away from the campus, and not feel like, I'm on the verge of crying or something. So
I know. And if you do, my advice is let it
Yeah.
out. As a parent myself, I've felt that a couple times. My
Yeah.
kids are a little bit younger, so my daughter's in high school and my boy's in last year of elementary school. And every year there's kind of like this, like it's a mix of emptiness.
Yeah.
Like there's something leaving your heart, but you know it's not, and
Yeah, because
proud.
when they're little, they're yours, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and now they're shared with the world, and they're not just yours, right?
I
And
know.
it's good, it's natural. I mean, they're supposed to get independent. That's part of our job, right?
And
Is
yeah,
to
and
get
you're
them to
proud
do
of
that.
them, you know?
But yeah, you miss them sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
But then also it's an opportunity to rediscover your couple and
Mhm.
this magic relationship that you've built with your wife, because before being a family you were a couple, right? So you'll rediscover
Yeah,
things about you and about
yeah,
your couple and about an extended version of this family that's now going to include fellow students that he's going to meet in this new university. Can I ask which university in Boston he's going to go?
yes. So he's going to Emerson College in Boston, which
Okay,
is like a really great
great
school
school.
for like arts and things like that. And he's in the filmmaking major, and that's what he
Oh,
does. Like this summer he just did 2 short films with his friends, and he has a short film at a film festival coming up, and like he's so motivated by this, and it's really great that like he's just this is what he like in his spare time. Yes, of course, he'll play video games and be on
uh-huh.
Instagram too much, but like in his spare time, he, you know, shoots films and edits them, and like just so it's really great when teenagers have like something they're passionate about that they'll
Yeah.
voluntarily spend their time on instead of having to drag stuff out of them to get them motivated to do stuff. So
Yeah,
again, that's part of why you know of course I'm always proud of him, I always love him, but like I'm very proud of that, that
of
he
course.
was able to find something like that.
It's great to see our kids passionate about something,
Yeah,
and where it's not a chore, it's not something they have to do, it's something they want to do, and they're
yeah,
expressing their personality and their passion in there. And it's so different from the work that you do. So I guess you get to discover life through his lens and his passion. I find that really, really interesting.
yeah. So my wife is a performer as well. She's a theater actress and director.
Ooh,
And so I have all these creatives in my house, and I
around
don't know
you.
how that happens. Not that I'm not creative, but like they're creative professionals. Yeah, it's yeah,
Well, they say opposites attract, and I believe that's true, and that's great for a reason. Because, like, if I take my husband, he's the polar opposite of me, but we make such a great team because
mhm,
he gets me seeing things his way, and I get seeing things, and we
right.
meet in the middle, and it's actually a pretty perfect balance that I'm really proud of. It's been going for 15 years. Hopefully, it keeps going
Yeah,
for a longer time, and it has an impact on how we raise our children too.
sure.
Getting, like, I guess, the best of both worlds and exploring different passions and utilizing different sides of their brains, where creatives use the left side and rational people and more logical people use the right side. I think it's just a great
Yeah.
exercise. Anyways, I think we could probably keep talking about this for a while.
Yes.
How about we dive into the title of our episode actually today is Making Performance Management Work for Hybrid Workplaces. But I know this is going to be incredibly popular of a topic because it's the new reality of the world that we live in. And it's actually connected to the article that led us to discover you as a person and your work, your books, and your articles. So I'm referring to the Harvard Business Review article that was titled Making Performance Reviews Fairer in a Hybrid Workplace, which was published a little bit earlier this year in February of 2023. Now we're in the summer. And in it, you talk about how creative approaches to performance evaluations are necessary in hybrid work settings to make sure that employees are evaluated and developed according to their merit, regardless of where they do their work. As I said, this is our new reality. So I'd really love to just talk about that. I want to hear you about what you've discovered in your research and the people that you've met, the businesses that you sat down with and studied. So maybe we could start with a little bit of how it's evolved. Before we do that, let's talk about how it was before, the
The bad
world
old
before
days. Okay. Yeah.
2020. How did you call them?
The bad old days of
The
performance
bad old
evaluation.
days. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that. Share your initial thoughts with me.
Yeah. So for a long time, performance evaluation is the thing that everyone dreads, right? Um, People don't like being evaluated. People don't like evaluating.
It's
Um,
stressful.
it's stressful. It's role conflict, right? Because, your supervisor, you want to be like, I'm on your side. And then you have to like, smack them down or something, right? Give
Yep.
negative feedback. But a lot of what performance evaluation has been for a long time, you know, really emphasized the evaluation, right?
Mhm.
And the pressure of it and the consequences that could be getting fired or getting promoted or getting a bonus or getting a raise.
Mhm.
And performance evaluations were generally done formally once a year just by the supervisor.
Mm.
And a lot of times on like a form that just has these like static criteria that don't really change and evolve as people's works change.
Very
Um,
rigid. Mm.
yeah, so this very rigid process that's high pressure from one person's point of view, the supervisor,
Mhm.
once a year, like this snapshot that could be very inaccurate of what somebody does fully.
For
So,
many reasons.
yeah, that's a real problem. I mean, and again, some of the purpose of performance evaluation is that we need to ensure accountability. We need to get data for decision making, right?
Mhm.
That's largely what performance evaluation is. But I think traditionally, they didn't either people didn't think of it or they forgot it over time that it really should be about development of employees and also development of the workplace. So understanding like here are some common things that are not going as well as they could be. Maybe it's not a person problem. Maybe that's a workplace issue that we could fix or
Yeah, or
improve
a
on.
process problem. Mhm.
Yeah, a process that we can improve. So even in a traditional sense, you know, I think performance evaluation lost its way. And Google famously said this about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, that their problem with the performance management system they had was that managers were using it as a substitute for day-to-day management, which is an interesting thing. So it's like the manager wouldn't have the conversation, the quick conversation, the quick
Right.
check-in, because they were waiting for the performance review to have that conversation. And again, you lose all that time. Things move quickly. People could be on the wrong track for a long time because you don't have that conversation.
Yeah.
So they said, so they
Misaligned.
changed their approach. Lots of companies changed their approaches. Um, and really to fix a lot of the things we just talked about, like making sure that there's a developmental component,
Mhm.
making it more continuous than just a one-time deal. So even if you're going to have a formal performance review only once or twice a year, you need to build in like goal-setting meetings and coaching sessions and
Mhm. Feedback
these
sessions. Mhm.
informal check-ins as you go, or it could be continuous. And some companies have like app-based systems where it could really be a continuous conversation.
Yes.
There should be multiple sources so that we're involving everyone and getting a fuller picture. And that's particularly important. And we'll talk about hybrid workplaces or remote workplaces, because that could be a point of connection, of making sure everybody's aware of what else is going on, which is, a concern when people are not co-located all the time.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. And then, we should be able to understand the context of performance, maybe not be so rigid in what we're looking at because jobs change over time, jobs evolve over time. And finally, things need to be more flexible. And again, I'll tie this to hybrid in a little bit, but
Mhm.
if you do performance evaluation right, and this was actually I've written like 18 or 20 things for HBR online. And one of my first ones was also about performance evaluation. So pre-COVID article about, work-life balance is easier if your manager knows how to do performance evaluations. And I really make the case. And so I feel like I was prescient, right? Like a little before the world changed. Like if you do performance evaluations well, you can let go of where work gets done, when work gets done, and even some of how work gets done, right? You don't have to track that stuff anymore. As long as you really track what gets done and how well it gets done and hold the line on those. So good performance management, good performance evaluation enables a company to implement remote work or hybrid work, because it allows you to focus on what's really important and let go a little bit of the things that you need to be more flexible on in the 2023 workplace.
I agree. When about halfway through the pandemic, well, I say that like it lasted a
Right.
specific
Yeah.
amount of time. In the fall of 2021, so a good year and a half, let's say,
Hmm.
into the pandemic, I sat down with a bunch of leaders and a bunch of employees to really understand, how they were living this transition to remote work that, let's face it, just happened overnight. We had to adapt, right? Some companies were a little bit more ready than
Yeah.
others. Some industries and different types of nature
Yeah.
of work were easier to implement remote work for. But one of the things that we heard is something that you said just a couple of minutes ago. Is about that connection just being so hard to build remotely, and so many things going unnoticed or invisible, whether you're referring to how people feel, how they were doing, what was going on around them. If I flip my computer here, you see my whole house. And during the pandemic, that was filled with like 3 kids and a husband walking here and some neighbor knocking on the door for something or whatever. It was easy to hide emotions, but it was also easy for conversations to go unnoticed. You wouldn't see a colleague lending a hand or unblocking me, or my boss wouldn't see that I had this behavior that had this impact on the team's results, and so on and so forth. So much of our emotions, work, and behaviors became invisible. And we saw quickly a need for managers and employees and teams to constantly align and have that way to have digital team meetings and one-on-one meetings, so that alignment that you're referring to and that constant goal setting or realigning on goals and giving us visibility on what it is that we're doing and where we're blocked becomes so important to hybrid or remote working. Yeah.
Yeah. So somewhat ironically, the fact that we all went to our homes, right, and saw each other through screens and saw our homes and stuff, that kind of led us to a better understanding, right, of the context around a lot of things that we were
Yes.
missing when we were all together, right, because we just assumed it. And it made smart companies realize they needed to be much more intentional about the types of conversations they had, the
You're
types
right.
of interactions they had. And I think, again, you were right. Some organizations were able to adapt more quickly than others. And I think those were the ones who already like had a thoughtful approach to workplace connection and these conversations already, so that adapting that online wasn't as big a difference as companies that didn't have the culture that kind of
Didn't
would
have
support.
those rituals. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But luckily we were able to adapt, and now we have, I guess, more of a routine for how it is we give ourselves visibility on what it is that we do, what we're working on, how that is aligned to our goals. And it was, for me, it really highlighted the importance of having like regular, probably weekly team
Yeah.
meetings, where you can spot those misalignments, or you can
Yeah.
identify blockers, or you can say, well, why are you working on this? Like, how is that connected to what we're trying to achieve? And then similarly, the importance of manager-employee one-on-ones. That became
Sure.
so important, just for caring for the humans around
Yeah.
us and giving us each other, because that's a two-way street, I feel, giving each other the attention and support that we need, and then making sure everything is okay. And then in terms of work, are you on track with your goals? Are you blocked on a project? Here's my feedback on how this went last week when you delivered this piece of work, or you facilitated this work session for our team. So live feedback, live coaching, so that, to your point, we don't go back to the way it was and it didn't work. Annual reviews where we pack up and stack up a bunch of things that we want to tell our employees and say, okay, this went wrong, this was great. How do you think that makes a person feel?
Yeah.
Not awesome, right?
Right.
You wouldn't want
Yeah.
your wife to wait for an annual couple meeting to say, hey, listen, Scott, it's
Right.
not working out so great.
Well, that's what, so somewhat the classic, like old school performance evaluation approach was pioneered by IBM back in like the 70s or so, where it was like the very rigid, like the top 20% get everything, the bottom 10% get fired, the middle, and it was once a year and high pressure and the whole works. And then, 20, 30 years later, the leaders are like, why are we doing this once a year? Nothing's on an annual schedule anymore.
No.
This needs to be continuous. And now they've actually done, some really interesting things. They have it's an internal app called PD at GE, performance development. And, in addition to like personal meetings and whatever, an employee has their goals and their milestones and stuff in the app. They could check off when they're completed things, put a little note to their manager. The manager could put a little note back to them. If there's an employee who wants to give some feedback to a peer, they could just be put on the, and then when the manager has to do the formal performance review, they have this whole record right in front of them. And it actually creates a context, one that a lot of times it's like, oh, good job on this, but let's have a quick conversation about it, right? In-person conversation about it. Or I have a question about your next milestone, and it leads to a one-on-one discussion. So the more continuous approach to managing performance really leads to better interpersonal communication, number one, but also it makes the evaluation part better. And I guess just if I step one more step back, we throw a lot of terms together in this area, right? There's performance appraisal or evaluation, right?
Yes.
There's performance management, right? And that has a different connotation to it, right? Performance evaluation, you're just evaluating performance. Performance management, right? You're evaluating, sure, but what you're trying to do is improve performance over time and manage performance over time, right? And so just that mindset change should lead someone to think about, how do I do this differently or better, or in a way that I'm managing as opposed to just evaluating.
Exactly. You're looking for a different outcome when you're managing performance. You're looking to fuel it, which is very different from just assessing it.
Yes.
Yes. In your article, you also say that what you found in your research, because you spent time with a few dozens of companies to talk about this. And you say that traditional good performance management still included frequent goal setting, peer feedback, progress reporting. All of this still mattered in the hybrid work setting, but the difference is how companies now need to apply these same principles. And you say that there's key things that you've seen companies do right. So the first thing was they define performance in terms of customer satisfaction, company values, core activities, and project completion, which is what you told us earlier. Second, they incorporated regular goal setting and feedback sessions, which is what you talked about again. And they encouraged collaboration and team building by sharing performance assessment responsibilities across the workplace. To me, this is like such an awesome recap. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah. So the first one, I'm not inventing something that no one's thought of before by saying, we should have some common values in our organization that we orient people towards, but not every organization does that, right? Or not every organization does that, or a lot of organizations talk about a handful of values, but they don't really follow through on them, right?
They don't behave accordingly.
Right. So, so in my research for the whole person workplace, I interviewed about 4 dozen, and these ranged from chief human resources officers, a couple CEOs, to kind of directors and even just rank and file employees in companies, small business owners too, about how they were dealing with all the, this was actually, it's kind of interesting. The book, I started writing it just before kind of COVID realities happened, but I did most of my interviews and writing as organizations are sifting through all this and trying to put it all together. So it's from an author point of view, it was a real, I was able to capture a very unique point in time. I wish none of that had ever happened. Right. But
of course,
but that's kind of where it is anyway. But getting back, so the companies that really cared about values, right? Now you have people not co-located. Now you have and now we have some organizations where some are co-located, some aren't, et cetera. You need something that brings everybody together in a common way. And that could be like the values of your company, or, whether that's customer satisfaction or how we take care of each other, or,
How we show
whatever.
up.
Yeah. Or whatever your core values might be. And, there's a relatively small, heating and air conditioning supply company in New Jersey that I talked to their chief human resources officer. And he said, that's what we do. We always based our performance evaluations on, our core values of, particularly of customer service, but also of being team players and, and of supporting, coworkers. It's part of and this is pre-COVID. It was part of what they assessed people on.
It's part of who they are and how they want their people to show up at work and behave.
Yeah. And, and then again, we often talk about like these big, name brand companies, but I wanted to make sure in the whole person workplace, again, I talked to some of those, but I talked to local HVAC supplier. And, there's no reason companies, large, small, globe spanning or local, can't implement some of these things. So, but anyway, when people are spread out, you need to tie them together with something. And organizations that have strongly held cultural values, tend to do a better job with that because there's something else that brings them together besides a paycheck. And then, the second part was, frequent conversations about performance. And I think that's clear. That should have been done before COVID, right?
Oh, yes.
But I think that gets to your point you were talking about before, that when we all went remote, right, in the crisis of COVID, it led many organizations to understand, like, wow, we wasted all this time before by not being intentional about how we communicated, and now we can, right? So I think a lot of organizations have learned that lesson. And then the third part was, what was the third thing that you mentioned? I know I wrote this and it should be on the top of my head, but
it was the importance of sharing the responsibility of assessing and providing that feedback.
Yeah. So I think that's, again, important if people are not as co-located to, well, first off, smart hybrid workplaces or remote workplaces figure out ways to connect people. And you mentioned some of that, JJ, and where, where in your work, but, there's a company I'm doing some work with, right now, that their hybrid is one day everybody's together. Every team has to have a day where they're all together. That's the second day. And then everybody has to be there a third day. And then the other 2 days, are work from home or whatever. But I'm like, that's an intentional choice, right? We need everybody together. And the day everybody's together, they're smart about it. They're like, what do we need? What are things we could do that we have everybody together? It's not just head down work in your own.
That makes no sense. Might as well stay home. Yeah.
Right. What do we need everybody together for? So this is when we have our all hands meetings, and this is when we have our, our different departments and different departmental leaders meet with each other and things like that.
Strategy syncs and brainstorms. Yeah.
Right. And then the team has a day together, and that's a day where it's a lot of group work and coordination and things like that. And then, people are together, and the third day I think is more so, there's a bit of mixing and people can have enough time for culture together. And then the other 2 days allow people the flexibility. And here in greater New York City and northern New Jersey, commute time is terrible. And if there's 2 days a week, people don't have to come into work, they are saving 4 hours.
4 hours? That's huge.
Yeah, an hour there, an hour back, 2 days a week.
Yep.
I mean, it's not for everybody, but for a lot of people, that's the commute. Yeah. And you save someone 4 hours a week. That's time for life. That's time to be a better parent, or to have a baseball game, or whatever else. That this is interesting. This is a point I really wanted to bring up. I had mentioned my prior HBR piece on performance evaluation. And, I start with, it was an anecdote, actually. Someone asked me on a podcast like 6-7 years ago, so Scott, what's the most important work-life benefit? And I said, actually, it's not a benefit. The best work-life benefit is good performance evaluations. because good performance evaluations should be able to enable people to work more flexibly. And again, if we're focused on what people do and how well they do it, and we can start letting go a bit of where they do it, when they do it, it gives people, they can then figure out custom fit solutions that fit their lives.
Yes.
And maybe that means, you're home from work sometimes, or you have one or two long days and a couple shorter days, or, you can, right, as long as things get done. And
it allows people to do their best work.
Yeah. But so many companies have caught on at least to some of this now, but I was howling into the void for probably a decade or two, advocating for this more flexible approach. And, again, smart companies, and I have a lot of them. Like, my favorite company that I follow is called Ryan LLC. And I've been friendly with their leadership for a long time. It's a tax services firm based out of Dallas, but they have many offices in the US. And they went to a results-only workplace in 2008. So way ahead. And a results-only workplace means it doesn't matter where or when you work or take vacation or whatever, just,
what matters is results.
Yeah. And, the thing is, they have to have a good way to manage performance, right, to do this. So again, they use this intranet-based system, which has a performance dashboard for everybody. You can continually track the 5 or 6 most important metrics for all your employees. You can see your own.
Employees see their own, right?
Yes.
Too?
Yeah. It's mostly based on goal setting or their revenue goals or whatever else. There's 1 or 2 things about 360-degree feedback. Okay. And there's customer satisfaction ratings that go in there. Managers also get rated on the engagement scores and turnover rates of their teams. But other than that, it's you just get your dashboard, right? And your manager can see your dashboard. And if your manager sees your dashboard is good, work from wherever, whenever, right? And they did this in 2008. And they were a company they were a good company from, even before that, but they were burning a lot of people out. They had like 30% turnover rate because it was one of those like intensive 65-hour workplaces.
Hustle culture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very hustle culture. And they were able to change it, right, over a couple of years to change the culture. But it was changing the performance review that enabled the flexibility. And then guess what? Turnover rate went down to like 4%.
Wow.
And, employee satisfaction through the roof. But not only that, client satisfaction was good, went to fantastic. Revenues went from good to fantastic. Every measure, right? Financial, customer-based, employee-based, fantastic. They're on the Fortune 100, best companies to work for every year now. The former CEO, who's the one who was able to kind of make this happen, she gets to talk all over the country about how they did it and teach all these other companies. And, that's a hustle culture company that was able to turn this right into a super flexible company. And guess what happened in, 2020 when COVID hit? Ryan just kept on going.
Let's
right?
go. They were already set up.
They hardly needed to adjust, right?
Absolutely.
Building the flexibility, and this is beyond performance evaluation, but if you have flexible structures and resilient structures in your organization, you can respond to crises and you can respond to change better. You'll be 10 steps ahead. And, hopefully COVID doesn't come back, but something's going to happen, right? That disrupts things. There are wildfires. There are natural disasters. There are, all these things that we have to deal with. And
it's a skill needed for the future, the ability to adapt to whatever gets thrown our way. We have to be ready for it.
Yeah. So anyway, but performance management's a big part of that.
It is. It is. It's central. And there's 2 things in there that really caught my attention is like obviously fan for this flexibility model. Mm-hmm. But what I love is that it comes with an increased, I'll say sense, but it's not the right word, but an increased responsibility and accountability
Yeah.
to get your things done. And that also transpired into what you said about holding managers accountable for their
Yeah.
team's engagement and retention or turnover on
Mhm.
the flip side. I love that it's a mix between you have this flexibility, but you're also accountable and responsible for
Sure.
delivering what you're supposed to deliver. So we trust you. You get this flexibility, but we need to trust you that you're going to deliver that side. And I find that that balance
Yeah.
is the right one for the individuals because you're working with responsible adults. And let's face it, performance management is much easier when you have responsible adults on your
Yes.
team that can be held accountable and hold themselves accountable to their goals and what they said they would accomplish and what their responsibilities are. But also for the business, like this is a win-win. You're in a place where you can utilize your strengths, develop new ones, deliver amazing work, which feels great because you're having a positive impact on your clients with your product or service.
Yeah.
And for the business, also winning because they get to stay alive, they get to make profits, they get to be productive, grow their business, impact more people in the world. I mean, who wouldn't want this? It's a
Yeah.
win-win.
Yeah. So, yeah, I 100% agree. I've sometimes gotten the question because the whole person workplace is kind of advocates for like an empathetic approach
It
to
does.
workplaces, and people mistake empathy for like being soft,
Yes.
and that's not the
It's
case,
not.
right? It's just listening and understanding somebody where they're coming from. Accountability is still accountability, right?
Mm.
And without accountability, it's only discretionary to do a good job, right? So you need that accountability. But I really advocate for a high trust approach, like you were talking about. So I'm going to give you the flexibility. I'm going to give you the tools you need. I'll be here to help, when you have questions or to check in or to give my advice. But like, I'm going to trust you. We're going to make sure you're living up to the trust. And if you are, great. If you're
No
not, well,
problem.
maybe we need to build more structure in, right? Or maybe we didn't do the right thing when we hired you or
Yeah.
something. And the question I get sometimes with this trust thing is like, well, how can I give this, give more of this flexibility and just trust that people do a good job? I'm like, well, why'd you hire them
Mm-hmm.
if you can't trust that, like, you don't have to watch them do their work, and that's the whole
You
thing about
shouldn't.
chair time and, like the bad old days of performance review. A lot of it was based on, oh, this person seems to be in the office all the time. They must be a good worker. Or,
Not necessarily.
when I leave at 5:30, this person's still there. Well, they were probably playing fantasy football for the
Mm-hmm.
last half hour, just waiting for you to walk by them and notice them. There was a lot of gaming of
Mm-hmm.
with
There was.
FaceTime and share time. And hopefully, a better approach and approach that works in a hybrid environment, as we talked about before, kind of eliminates some of that. And,
Mm-hmm.
when Ryan changed their performance review system, I mean, they literally before this, they tracked billable hours, and that was the number one criteria they looked for in
Yeah.
when evaluating people. So it was literally based on how much time you spent at work.
Yeah.
And now, of course, it's based on these are your dashboard and how you're doing. They found that the people who like worked the most hours in the old system were only kind of like middle performing employees,
Oof.
and a lot of people who worked lesser hours were actually more productive because a lot of people just made sure to be visible in the workplace, and that counted as hours, right? But it wasn't really productivity, and that's really what we want, right?
Mm. I agree. I'm a morning person. I tend to go to bed pretty early. Probably years of raising three kids in my backpack. I'm so tired. I fall asleep around 9, but I'm at around 4 or 5 o'clock. My sleep is in, and I'm good. I get up, I do my coffee, I watch the news,
Oh
read my
man.
paper, and I do my best work
Okay.
between 6 and 9 a.m. And trust
Yeah.
me, in those 3 hours where Slack is shut down, I'm not checking my emails. I'm just doing my deep work. I need to put
Yeah.
together this paper. I need to put together a research plan. Um, I probably do 6, 7, 8 hours worth of
Yeah.
work that I would during the day, because there's interruptions, there's kids popping for
Sure.
lunch, there's whatever going on, a colleague asking for help. So I save that work for a little bit later, where it's like more surface level work where I don't have to be fully concentrated. But my deep work I do between 6 and 9. I'm motivated, I'm passionate, I get tons of ideas. Like I'm just this fidgeting thing on my chair. I have my brain is going so fast, not fast enough for what I can type. And this is what works best for me.
Yeah.
But you can't expect to have my full attention and facilitate a meeting at 3:00. I am dead. Like, this is time where I go running. And I feel that this is what flexibility allows. And my boss and my teammates know this about me. They know I'm going to be there and available until 4:00. If they have a question, I'm there. No worries. I might take a 30-minute break because I need to, charge my eyes and rest the eyelids a little bit, because I've been up so long. But it allows me to have this flexible life, and being in a team and a workplace that gives me that trust and trusts me also to deliver the outcomes that I'm expected to in return. Is that what you mean by flexibility? Is that what you mean about the whole person workplace?
Yes. I mean, that is, first off, I want this, I'm going to take this clip and like play it in my classes this semester, because it like just perfectly, because I always advocate for, even if it's not formal flexibility, like informal flexibility that allows you to do that, right?
Yeah.
Is so important. And if you were forced to go to a workplace during 9 to 5, you're commuting during your most productive hours, and then you're getting to the workplace after your most productive hours, right? I'm a night owl, so I'm just waking up when you're like finishing your best work. But there are some really smart companies, and I highlight one of them. It was called State Street Bank, and they did this, again, pre-COVID, kind of a pioneer in this, where, they forced their managers, or they had their managers go through the tasks and job descriptions of all their employees and identify differences in them. Like, this is a collaborative piece of work. This is a deep piece of work, like you talked about. This is a quick, surfacey piece of work. And then they were like, well, those deep pieces of work, this is good for maybe individual work from home, flexible work. The collaborative stuff, this is stuff that needs to be maybe with people, right?
Absolutely.
And because they identify that, then they have a conversation with their employee on that. And then they figure out a custom work schedule for them based on it. And
I remember reading about that. It's
so
very
it
interesting.
sounds like what you just described, which is like, here's how it works for me. I can really get this portion of my work done super well at this time by myself. And then, yes, my touch points with others and my collaboration things, I could do that throughout the rest of the day, but that's not my deep concentration. And I presume, and I don't know, I mean, it seems to me you probably do a very good job. So like your organization would be silly to want to layer more structure over you than you need, because they could trust you to manage your time, to do your job in a way that really makes sense for you and for them.
And I feel that's just treating people like responsible adults. And to your point earlier, trusting them to do the job you hired them to do.
Yeah.
You hired them for a skill, for experience, for a certain way of being and interacting. Trust them. And go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted, but you're 100% right. And again, this goes back to letting go a bit of where, when, and how work gets done.
Yes.
Right? But making sure to hold the line on, like, are the things we need to get done getting done well? And that enables you, JJ, to custom fit solutions for your kids and your family life and your other outside of life priorities. And that really is, again, I keep going back to this whole person workplace, but that's what I mean by a whole person workplace, that managers and organizations that enable what you're able to do, they're seeing you, or at least they're valuing you as not just a part of the machine, right? But as a person.
Yes.
And by giving you some of this flexibility, you're able to succeed in some of your other life priorities, right? And so I say managers and organizations should have an eye towards that when they make their decisions in their workplace. And it could be flexibility. It could be the work-life benefits that we think of, right? But I think a lot of it is, paying people a livable wage, giving people developmental opportunities so they feel good at work and are learning, giving people time and place flexibility, are incredibly important for helping people succeed, not just at work, but kind of in their lives as well.
Absolutely, I agree. And we've been talking a lot about the individual component of this, where it makes sense for me and it would make sense for you being an employee. We must not forget also the importance of your work is also, it's pretty rare that there is no collaboration and no connection or interdependence with others. So we have to also remember it needs to work for the individual. The manager needs to be okay with it. And all that's great. But oftentimes there's a team and organizational context in which I evolve and work. And so I also think it's important to align with the rest of the team. Like if it makes no sense that I'm working completely off schedule and I'm not available for, if you and I were to work together, if you're a night owl and I'm a morning person, we need to be really okay for the nature of our work to work async, basically. But the reality is there are moments where we need synchronous moments to get our work done and collaborate. So as a team, we need to have norms or principles or ways of working or agreements. It's like everybody needs to be available for a chat or for an alignment or for whatever between the hours of 10 and 2. Does that work for everyone's schedule? Good. We're good to go. Let's not book too many meetings during those times. Let's reserve spots for deep work and so on in a way that makes sense for our team. And you can adapt that to the nature of work that you do.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. That is, I think, vitally important. Again, it gets back to intentional communication, right?
Exactly.
And again, the company that I said I was working with that has, their hybrid schedule kind of is that, right? That they have a day week for their team to be together.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And,
because there's a need for it.
Yeah. And I think that's why, I think you guys work fully remotely, right? Or a lot of you do? Is that correct?
We're fully distributed, meaning we have an office in Montreal where a lot of us are, because we were a very office-centric company before COVID hit. We had just renovated our office. It was amazing and beautiful. And our culture was really built a lot around the office. So it's quite a shift. But to your point, we had a lot of rituals and agility to adapt fairly quickly. And the nature of our work was easily done remotely. But yes, so you have the office. If you're located near the greater Montreal area, you have the flexibility to go in. You want to go in 5 days a week? No worries. And then you want to work fully remote? No problem. Whenever there's a need, let's say in October, my team wants to meet in person. We want to do a big exercise and strategize and come up with our team norms and all of that. We want to do that in person. So we're flying in half the team from Toronto, another fella from Winnipeg. But that's up to us, right? We all agreed as a team that we wanted to do that. And then aside from that, 2 times a year, the entire WorkLeap team gets together. So 420 of us all go into the Montreal office 2 times a year, 2 days in April, 2 days in November. That's the only time we have to be in the office. And there's an intent. There's a purpose to it. We have very specific things that we do together as a team.
Okay. Good. Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that, even though it seems really daunting, I think for managers, and, this is where the resistance point comes. It's like, how do I make it work when some people are coming in and some people don't, and some people this and some people that? And performance evaluation is kind of what they key on as like, I can't do this, or this is too hard. And it's more challenging, I think, than when everybody's was co-located. So I have empathy for that point of view. But this is where that intentional communication comes in. And I think getting it back to performance management, having or performance management that's not a once a year or twice a year formal
Institution.
process, but is more informal, contextual, continuous, focus on development and values,
Mm,
maybe getting more than one perspective on things, right? So everybody's kind of thinking about performance together. That enables a manager to make that work. And if you make that work, then a workplace like yours can work.
absolutely.
Yeah. And
And thrive.
yeah. So in the short run, I think, the adjustment period for managers who are reluctant to do this or anxious about it, I understand that anxiety. However, I think it might be more work in the short run to figure out how I'm going to do this or how we're going
Mm,
to do this as a workplace or as a team. But once that's set, it actually, I think, enables better performance, which, your people perform better. Guess what? There's fewer problems you need to manage,
yeah,
which then saves you a lot of time. So there's a short run, I think, adjustment period that might be more work for a lot of managers, but I think embracing it enables so much good things down the line.
absolutely. I fully agree. Wow, we've covered so much. Thank you for sharing your stories and your insights and all of your learnings. I think this has been just a walk in the park. It's like two friends chatting about something
Yeah.
they love to chat about. This has been wonderful. I do want to talk a little bit about, and you did all the way through, about your book, The Whole Person Workplace. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on? Because I know this is, your life's work. This is something you're very
Yeah.
passionate about. So please do feel free to share more.
Yeah. Thank you. I mentioned it a fair amount of time. So the
Hmm.
book's not just about performance management, although there's a chapter in it on that. Um,
Yes.
but I would say the whole person workplace really starts with a cultural mindset or a
Mm,
cultural value that we value employees as more than employees. We value them as people.
mhm,
And if you really have that value, right, you need to express it in as many ways as possible as an organization. And that could be everything from the recruitment to hiring to onboarding to performance reviews to compensation to benefits to work
mhm,
life stuff to flexibility to parental leave to volunteerism, supporting that, and what I did in this book was, I talked to so many organizations, real cross section, about how they at least partially enact these values, right, in all these different places. And it's, the big boys, it's, BASF and Adidas, and it's literally a food store with 14 employees in the mountains of New Hampshire and kind of everything in between, white collar work, blue collar work, etc. And I guess what I'd like to say is if you feel like your workplace could use some of those values, what I tried to do in the book was to kind of lay out the values and then give lots of examples of companies,
mhm.
large and small, every kind of budget, and how they've been able to enact at least part of this as they go. So you can start from wherever you are and get lots of examples of organizations that have been able to do it. So,
Mhm.
anyone can do it. It takes caring about it. It takes a little bit of listening, a little bit of empathy, a little bit of creativity.
Mm.
And I think with those things, any organization can become an organization that's more supportive of their employees, which helps employees. But I think, and a lot of research shows supporting employees helps your organization be more successful too.
Does. It does. I thought about you the other day because I know a lot of your work is on dads and
Yeah.
dads in the workplace and all of that. I think earlier in your
Yeah.
career, right? That's how it all started.
Yeah.
I read this study saying that working dads were hesitant to use work
Yeah.
life balance benefits for fear of negative impacts on their
Yeah.
performance reviews.
Yeah.
Like, that's scary.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it speaks to me when you say workers are more than just workers, they're people.
Right.
Consider
Yeah.
them for
So
their whole person.
yes. So my earlier work that my entry into work life stuff was looking at how I was really like, who needs good information? I'm like, well, working parents. Okay, a lot of
Yes,
other people are doing mom stuff. Let me focus on the dad stuff. And it's a little
yeah,
more personal to me too.
of course.
But I shifted, and the whole person workplace is about managers and employers needing this good information. But
Yes,
yeah, so you're right. And the thing is, dads who are visibly like involved dads, they get a lot of the same mom penalties that all
yes.
mothers get. Um, and to some degree, women in the workplace face certain prejudices,
Hmm.
where because it's like the presumption is for women is that yes, you are the primary parent and caretaker of your home, and you're also working, right? So
Yes.
there's always that little thing about you have split loyalties, right? For men, it's you are the provider,
Breadwinner.
and you know what? If you're going to do this family stuff, now you have split loyalties too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so men do face a fair amount of that pressure. Things are changing. Many organizations are much more flexible now,
Agreed.
are much more supportive now. I think even, generationally, men and young fathers have a different idea of what they want out of fatherhood than
Absolutely.
previous generations too. So these things will change over time. I mean, organizational leadership is always one generation older than
Hmm.
the people dealing with it, right? So it's going to take a little bit of time for that to happen. But yeah, I've worked with plenty of companies on trying to make sure the culture is more supportive of all parents, not just working moms.
Amen.
Yep.
Amen. Wonderful. How about we close with the traditional vibe check question? Scott, how are you feeling? Really?
I'm feeling great. I really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like I hope for the people who are listening feel like this was kind of a productive conversation and helped you
Hmm.
think about things maybe in a way that you could bring back to your workplace. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed my conversation, JJ. So I feel I feel good. I feel connected to you actually,
Oh.
and yeah, it's great.
Likewise, me too. I feel energized. I'm like pumped. I could go for like a 15-kilometer run right now, the head full of ideas. And I agree with you. Hopefully, our conversation sparked new ways of seeing and doing things. And that's the goal. It's really to share stories and inspire our audience to think and do differently, re examine the status quo, and not fear experimenting and trying things for the better good, for the greater good, I must
Yeah.
say. Thank you again so much for being with us. I hope we get to do this again very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I had a great time.